Good morning, everybody. It's 9:45 on Monday, December 3rd. Staying home today to attend to some personal matters that need attention. That does not mean I still can't spend some time on my chess games, which need attention as well, but certainly not nearly as much. They're spread out over the course of 5 to 10 days, with the exception of one. I accidentally accepted a challenge for a one-day timeout. Not adverse entirely to play those, but typically I avoid them. They can be liabilities. It does not afford me the grace of a day. I must make moves in these games every day, so I don't play one-day timeouts. A one-day timeout is the correspondence chess equivalent of something like lightning chess. Lightning chess is faster than blitz. Blitz is typically 5 minutes. 5-5 is included. It's arguable where its bounds lay. But lightning is typically 3 or 2 minutes. There's also... I forget the name. It's got another name. There are 1 minute time-setting live chess games. I've tried them. They're different because you have to realize chess isn't really what's at stake here. It's time. Because me and my opponent, only have a minute. If the two players are competent and of a specific skill level or stronger, they'll be able to develop their opening within that minute. But then they face the middle game. And then it really becomes a battle against time, not a chess match. They're fun, though. Really what they do is drill your opening development. And they do strengthen that aspect of the game when you apply it to something like a 5-5 blitz. Because now you've sped up your ability to comprehensively develop in the opening within the matter of a minute. So you've given yourself more time in the middle game and in the end game, but typically the middle game is where most of the time is spent. Chess is like a movie in that way. I'm a screenwriter and a film editor. Okay, I'm going to play the Evans Gambit here. And there's something called the 3-act structure. In a screenplay, if it's 2 hours long, the 3-act structure spends 30 minutes on the first act, an hour on the second, and 30 minutes, just looking at this game, and 30 minutes on the third act. So the first act is introduction, the second act is development, and the third act is conclusion. And we could say that metaphor simply applies quite beautifully to chess. The first act is the opening, the second act is the middle game, and the third act is the end game. I'm surprised. It appears that I left my bishop hanging, but he didn't take... Oh no, excuse me. Sorry. I have a chess club member who does something like this. He's dyslexic, and his dyslexia arises in his interpretation on the board. He thinks my piece is his, or his piece is mine, or his piece is a different piece. The way it influences his ability to play varies, and it's rather fascinating, to be honest. I mean, I'm sorry, my brother-in-law is also dyslexic, and yeah, it's certainly a shame in a way, but remember, your disabilities are not necessarily utter weaknesses. If you learn how to adapt under that condition, you're like a Marine. Semper Fi, adapt and overcome. That's not what Semper Fi directly translates to, but Semper Fi is their hoorah, if you will, and adapt and overcome is a credo that's spread across the entirety of USA's military force, but is quite often exemplified in the Marine Corps. Army likes it. The Air Force has always been regarded by the other branches of the military as a little elitist and snobby, if you will. We're the Air Force. We fly crazy, expensive jets. Yes, that's true. You do. But that doesn't make you any better than, let's say, an infantryman in the Army. God bless them. America's military force experiences 80% of its casualties in the infantry division. Yet brave men and women will voluntarily enroll in that division of the army. I do not like war. I am anti-gun violence. However, I'm fascinated by guns because they are technological and engineering marvels. And I do observe the fact that from a direct result of von Braun's V missiles that he created for Hitler during World War II, we recruited him after we won, and he is a direct causation, if you will, of NASA's rocket program and our exploration of space. So a great war born of hatred and a desire to conquest has resulted in a quite peaceful at this point conquest of the stars and an exploration of that which is beyond this planet. So I feel World War II, albeit a war, resulted in a awakening in humanity on a global scale. Such would be a global war's influence. And yes, if we call the war an antithesis and we call the end of it a thesis, then the synthesis is an advancement in human civilization. A lot of people don't like war, myself included. I don't believe it's necessary anymore because we've reached a point of civilization advancement in which war is nearly negligible. But it's still going to occur because whenever you have development or advancement in anything, there are those who cling to the old ways. Anyway, I went on too long. Let me attend to these games. So I'm being very cautious because of the threat of bishop takes h7 check. Because what that does is it gives check and sacrifices the bishop, but discovers an attack by the rook against anything I have on the c-file. And mind you, my queen was once on the c-file, but now a rook faces a rook and is defended by its queen. So I pretty much neutralize that threat. I can file up my c-file rook onto the e-file. I can bring it to the d-file. However, pushing the pawn on the d-file will not result in an effective tactic, the fork against the rook in bishop, because if the bishop takes, the queen has that square defended, so rook taking is actually losing 5 points for 3 points, instead of gaining 3 or 5 points for 1 point, as the fork would do with the pawn properly defended. Well, let's say supported. Defense is when you defend against an attack, but reinforcing the defense of an attack is support. When you have pieces supporting the one that's involved in leading out the attack. And both defense, support, attack, reinforcement, if you will, they all revolve around influence on a specific square. Where a piece is, sometimes where a piece may go. It does get a little complex, but it's pretty simple when you think about it. Alright, let's get going again. Wislakito. I like the Me2LO. Or M2LO. I wonder if the LO is in reference to the rating system. Pug 201 probably has a pug as a pet. Mass Rai 01, just whatever, I can't figure it out. Nidalny Stein. Nick Gabe. I would love if the Gabe is in reference of the Archangel Gabriel. My email address uses Gabe like that. I'm not going to reveal the rest, but ever since I was 19, maybe even 18, I've had a strong affinity with the Archangel Gabriel. Let's just call that a fun fact, shall we? Alright, back to chess. Interesting, my opponent has spent a lot of tempo development opportunities progressing his pawns to the current position and developing minor pieces and making no effort to avail himself the opportunity to castle kingside, in spite of the fact that I can do so at any moment I want, this move or the next or the following. He's truly playing a game of tempo and I admire it deeply, but I think he's wasting his efforts because I respond to his development in a way that gains almost half a tempo. When you stop the development intention of a piece, such as my pawn move I just made, no longer can that bishop attack that pawn above my queen. Granted, my queen defends it, but one attacker, add another, now I needed to add another defense. You know, it's still striking a point on the board. But a simple deflection, well, not in this case, or a simple impediment in this case, by playing a pawn move, which is a small tempo, stops that effort. And now he has to rethink, and the rethinking process and replanning and changing strategy would most certainly involve at least one tempo, if not more, like 2 or 3. And then my castling now, when he can't, is such a huge tempo advantage. Now I have to be careful. I shouldn't have any issue if he plays something like rook to e8 and then rook to e5 check to try to win my rook. I can still defend it, but my next move, you must know, is going right up against that pawn by playing b6, king to b6, that is, intending king to b7 to pressure his rook and then ultimately promoting that pawn, of course, to a queen. When you promote pawns, you most often promote to a queen. Why wouldn't you? It's the powerful piece on the board, the most powerful piece on the board, worth 9 points of material value. It can move as if a rook and a bishop had a kid. However, there's one piece that is stronger than the queen, only under certain circumstances because of its quirk, if you will, and that piece is the knight. No other piece on the board moves such as the knight. Every piece moves either orthogonally or diagonally, and that means up and down, left and right, or on the diagonal. Not too many people know orthogonally as a term, but they do know diagonally. Just know that orthogonally is related to diagonally, but just shifts the direction of movement. The knight changes that. Not only that, every time the knight moves, it changes the color of square it's on. That is very important when trying to learn endgames. So anyway, the one exception when the pawn does not promote to a queen is when the pawn promotes... Here I need to sacrifice the bishop. When the pawn promotes to a knight. And now you would say, when would you ever do that? Why promote to a knight when you can have a queen? Well, here's why. Promoting to the knight may, in certain positions, deliver checkmate. And that's the killing blow. And some players are very blind to that because they assume you're going to promote to a queen. Remember, in the endgame, look for opportunities of a clever checkmate. And if you are losing or winning, look for opportunities of a stalemate. These are the major threats in an endgame's ability to win for one particular player. Or for the player's ability to win in the endgame, I suppose. But I think you know what I mean. I played games where my opponent decided to promote the 2 remaining pawns after promoting one to a queen, promotes the remaining pawns to queens, and then gets into a checkmate. Too much power and influence may result in a checkmate. I think this is a comfortable move. You know this game's utterly lost. I often don't resign because I like to fight to the bitter end because of the risk of stalemate for the winning player. But here, I'm going to respect this Nidal and Stein. I'm going to resign. Stein, resign. Alright. This one I'm going to fight. I surely, most likely won't win, but I can be a really decadent annoyance with that rook. At some point, I'm going to have to sacrifice it, though, if it plays precisely. But I'm curious to give this one a shot. I like to test people's endgame, especially in online chess. A lot of players are weak in their endgame in online chess because they win quite often in the middle game and expect their opponent to resign. So quite simply, they lack experience in the endgame. They haven't played as many situations, and that's foolhardy. Jose Raul Capablanca from Havana, Cuba, who beat 27 consecutive time world chess champion Emmanuel Lasker in said location, Havana, Cuba, and won the world chess championship, advises players to learn the endgame first. Because his philosophy in this statement is in regards to, regardless, if you will, of how the opening and middle game develop, if you know every endgame you can, and every endgame that is possible, whichever position you arise at in the endgame, I say arise instead of arrive, though they are synonymous in a way, you'll be prepared for that particular endgame. Quite wise. Learn the last part first and learn the other ones later. Because if you don't do those too well, you'll still win regardless. It's like an insurance policy in chess. I love it. Okay, now I have an opportunity to get my rooks into action and support my queen on the d file. Now, the big question, which excuse me, which rook to move? You know, which rook to move is always a question. In this case, it's quite aggressive because typically the queenside rook is developed to the d file and the kingside rook developed to the e file. And that's because of the play, most likely in these games, for white's first move of pawn to e4. However, because my pawn at e4 is supported by a fianchettoed bishop at g2, I'm going to bring my kingside rook into the support position, because this offers me opportunities. I can support with the queenside rook eventually. It will cost 2 tempo. But I can also use that in support of the progression of my a-file pawn. So we can either attack or support. We're giving ourselves options. You want to give yourself options in chess. You don't ever want to be committed to one line, because what if that one line is a force made against you? That's a foolhardy line to walk down. Alright, let's go on. I think he made a bad move. Let's see, what would he do? He'd have to move here. I'd give check. Mate. So, what if he doesn't move there? What if he imposes with the bishop? I give check. He'd be wise to move here. That would cause me some problems. But if he makes the mistake of moving his king, I have checkmate in 1. All those rooting for me, I need your prayers. In the metaphorical sense, of course. Pray for what you truly believe God will deliver you, and nothing less. That's why I don't pray at all. Sorry. And no, I am not an atheist. I'm just a true believer. And I believe that what's been coined as interpretations of belief is failing. I do not denounce any particular religion, but I criticize each, and I aggressively assert that all religions present discrete perspectives of a single truth, and no single religion expresses the truth. But if you were to take all into consideration and somehow combine them, you will have a closer vision of that truth. Perspectivism. Read it. It's a book by Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche, a German philosopher. Also read The Gay Signs. A poor, too literal translation of what should better be translated as The Joyful Wisdom from its German title. Yes, this is what I was expecting. This game is developing exactly as I thought. I'm not going to win. I'm probably going to be forced to sacrifice my rook for that pawn. And then he'll definitely have an advantage. But I'm going to fight on in this one, in the name of honor and glory and fortitude. Okay, what looks like maybe a mistake. Check, skewering the rook through the king. Defense by the pawn. I really have no follow-up on that. So that's a wasted tempo. This, however, is not. Because in the event I play this and he plays this, I can play this, or I can play this, which is more prudent. So I'm going to go ahead with that move. I'm going to castle in the hopes he does the same. Oh, this game... this game is going to be interesting. He did not take the bishop. I'm not entirely sure why. 21-25 did not take the bishop. I have to ask. I did have a typo. Sorry. Stupid phones, right? It's 10:10. I take screenshots of things like that. It's silly synchronicity, but it's fun. If you happen to look at the clock or find yourself looking at the clock at certain moments during the day and they exhibit this sort of synchronicity in regards to symmetry or repetition of numbers. I mean, these are times you've been cued into the time of the day, and the times you observe are unique. A lot of people, if they look at the clock and see 11:11, they make a wish. Now, I use military time, so the synchronistic events that I come across are slightly different than those who don't use such time. For example, there's only one 11:11 a day for me. The other one's 23:11. It's not very mathematically synchronistic. People from my past on chess.com are showing their face and challenging me directly. That's quite interesting. Typically, you don't see your opponent again. So now this is a sacrifice in an effort to win a rook. Yeah, we knew this was going to happen. Excuse me. This game is a rather tight one. There are very few squares to which my pieces can move, and those available are rather ineffective in my development. So I have to shift tactics here in the middle game and transpose my position to afford myself opportunities to move to squares that can help advance my progress towards a victory. Note his bishops, the dark and light squared. That file is quite closed down up there on his home ranks, the 7th and 8th in this game as he is black. Putting a rook on the 7th rank and then bringing the other filed rook up to support that, to support that rank is often a tactic in endgames. Can be launched in the late middle game to accelerate the progression into a 1 endgame, but here I can't do that. And here I have a lot of liabilities, such as my pawn at d4. Oh, excuse me. When I was talking about that rook file, I hope I was saying C. If I was saying F or something silly, please revise that. It was on the C file. But again, my liability of my pawn at d4 is protected by my knight at f3, but it's attacked by a bishop on black's side at b6. So when I have to transpose my position in the middle game, I have to remember not to give up the pieces that are liable and leave them hanging of any defenders. This guy's playing very solid. I truly respect this play here in this game. Okay, I'm going to make a slightly transitional move. The reason I'm playing queen to a2 is I want to develop my knight at d2 to b3, because then I could play it to c5. And even though that may not help transpose my position to a winning endgame, it is at least going to disrupt the stability temporarily of this middle game position. That's a straight blunder. Okay, I give this check, not to win the rook, because the king will take the bishop, but I will take... No, I won't. Excuse me. I was saying that so boldly. Sorry, it's a bishop below that bishop, not a rook. Had it been a rook, it would have been a discover check, and or a check with a bishop, and a discovered attack on his bishop at b4 with a rook. Good thing I called that. Sorry, that's that chess dyslexia. I'm not the player I was talking about. Another one does it, but I do it every now and then. So to a degree, I understand his grievances with that problem. But his is exacerbated by dyslexia, which he freely admits he has. I find that fascinating. Because dyslexia doesn't just apply to words. This is a safe move, because if he plays pawn at d6 takes e5, that discovers the attack on his queen with my, or by my rook on the d file. It's pretty much a free pawn. Okay, can we go back to that game? Alright, yeah, I'm not sure how. So I did that because I want to get that rook off the board, you know? I have another rook. I can even sacrifice a bishop in that exchange. Because I have free pawns, open pawns, and a rook, and he would have none. So promote, or at the very least, checkmate with the rook and king. Can't go back like I can on the other sites. Or rather, I should say on the other apps. I don't know how to look up archives on the app. I can do it on the site. Alright, catch you guys later.